Welcome back to the deep dive. You ready to dive into something kind of complex today?
Always up for a challenge. What do we got?
Well, we're going to tackle the Indian high court system.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I know legal systems can seem a little dry, maybe even intimidating,
Yeah, a little bit.
but they're actually the backbone of any functioning society, right?
Yeah.
And India's, well, it's particularly fascinating.
Really is, yeah.
And, this deep dive is especially for you UPSC aspirants out there.
Absolutely. Can't ignore this for the exam.
Nope, not at all. But it's also relevant, I think, for anyone who really wants to understand India better,
Yeah, because it touches so many aspects of life.
Exactly. So to guide our exploration today, we've got excerpts from a text all about the Indian judiciary.
Okay, good, solid source material then.
Yeah, and our mission is to really extract the key features of this high court system, the structure, the powers, and why they matter.
Sounds good. A blueprint for understanding the legal landscape.
Exactly. So ready to rewind the clock a bit.
Sure, let's do it.
Where did these high courts even come from? What's the origin story?
We got to go back, way back to British India.
Oh,
1862 to be exact.
okay.
That's when the first three high courts were established. Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras.
Wow, so we're talking about a system that's over 150 years old.
Yeah, carrying a lot of history, a lot of baggage,
Fascinating how these structures from that colonial era, they still shape India today.
Oh, absolutely. The legacy is undeniable.
So from those three initial high courts, what's the picture now? How many are there?
Today, we've got 24 high courts spread across the country.
Okay, 24.
Each state, generally, has its own high court, aligning with its boundaries.
Makes sense.
But of course, there's always an exception.
Oh, there's always an exception.
Delhi.
Delhi, of course.
It's the only union territory that has its own dedicated high court.
Oh, Delhi. Always going to be a little different, right?
Got to stand out.
So if we're trying to visualize this system, right?
Yeah.
We've got the Supreme Court at the very top.
Right at the apex.
Yeah. The highest judicial authority. And then...
Then we have the high courts.
Okay.
Acting as the top judicial bodies within their states, or sometimes groups of states.
Okay.
And then below them, the network of subordinate courts handling those everyday cases, impacting people directly.
So it's kind of like a pyramid structure.
Exactly. Supreme Court at the top,
Right.
high courts in the middle, and then the subordinate courts forming the base.
Okay. That helps to picture it.
And that hierarchical structure, it's crucial,
How so?
Well, it brings organization, ensures things run smoothly, that there's a clear path for appeals.
Right. So a case can move up through the system if needed.
Correct.
Now, how do judges even get to these powerful positions in the high courts?
The appointment process.
Yeah, I bet there are tons of UPSC questions about this, right?
Oh, you can bet on it. It's always a hot topic.
It seems like a pretty intriguing process, to say the least.
Well, the Constitution lays it out.
Okay.
It's the President of India who formally appoints high court judges.
The president.
But it's not like a solo decision,
So who else is involved?
The president consults with the Chief Justice of India
Okay, makes sense.
and the governor of the state where that high court is located.
Right, so they get a say, too.
And if a high court has jurisdiction over multiple states, well, then all those governors are consulted.
Oh, wow. So it can get pretty complicated.
It can be a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, I can see how that might lead to, some tension sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Different branches of government, different priorities.
All right, everyone wants their voice heard.
And then, of course, there's that whole debate about the collegium system versus the NJJC.
Oh, right. That was a big one. Can you remind us what that was all about?
Sure. So for a long time, India followed this collegium system where a group of senior-most judges, they basically recommend names for these judicial appointments.
So the judges themselves had a lot of power in shaping the courts.
Yeah, but then in 2014, the government, they tried to change that.
How so?
They introduced the NJJC, the National Judicial Appointments Commission.
Okay.
And this would have given the executive branch, meaning the government, a much bigger say in choosing judges.
So it was like a power struggle, judiciary versus executive.
What got it? A real clash of titans.
So who won that battle?
Well, the Supreme Court, they stepped in.
Makes sense. They're the guardians of the Constitution.
Exactly. And they struck down the NJJC.
Wow. So they basically upheld the collegium system.
Yeah, their argument was that the NJJC could, compromise the independence of the judiciary.
Right. And that's crucial in a democracy.
Absolutely. Can't have one branch wielding too much power.
So imagine you're a law student in India dreaming of becoming a high court judge one day.
Ambitious. I like it.
What do they need? What are the qualifications to even be considered?
Well, first off, Indian citizen.
You think that's a given?
Then, at least 10 years of experience.
10 years. Wow.
Yeah. Either as a judicial officer, so working within the court system,
Okay.
or as an advocate, practicing law in a high court.
So they're really looking for people with serious experience.
Yeah, no rookies here.
Is there a minimum age, like you have to be a certain age?
That's interesting because unlike the Supreme Court, which does have an age requirement, the Constitution, it doesn't specify any age limit for high court judges.
So theoretically, you could have a pretty young judge presiding over these important cases.
Theoretically, yes. No gray hair requirement.
That's fascinating. Now, once appointed, how long do they get to hold this position?
They have what we call secure tenure.
Okay.
They hold office until they reach 62.
62.
Of course, they can resign earlier if they want.
Right. They have that option.
And there's also the provision for transfer to a different high court.
Transfer. So they could be moved around.
Yeah, it's a sensitive issue, though, you know.
Yeah, I could see how that could be tricky, maybe even open to manipulation.
The president has the power to transfer judges, but only after consulting with the Chief Justice of India.
So there are some checks and balances in place.
Yeah, the Supreme Court's also made it clear that transfers should only happen in exceptional cases, you know.
Right, like for the greater good, not as a way to punish a judge or something.
Exactly. Got to protect that judicial independence.
Makes sense. So what about removal from office? Can that even happen?
It is possible, but it's this super complex, rarely used process called impeachment.
Impeachment? Wow. Serious stuff.
To remove a high court judge, you need a special majority vote in both houses of parliament.
Both houses, so the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha.
That's right. And the grounds for removal are very specific. Proved misbehavior or incapacity.
So those are pretty high bars to clear.
Definitely. Not an easy feat.
Has any high court judge actually ever been impeached in India?
This might surprise you, and remember this for your UPSC exam.
Okay, I'm all ears.
No high court judge has ever been impeached in India.
Wow, never.
Never. The process is intentionally designed to be super rigorous, you know.
So it's not something that's taken lightly.
Nope, that judicial independence is fiercely protected.
That's really interesting. So we've covered appointments, tenure, this very rare possibility of removal.
Right, the who's who and how long they stay.
Now, let's get to the heart of it. What do these high courts actually do? What are their powers and jurisdiction?
This is where it gets really interesting, where you start to see the gears turning in the Indian legal system.
Okay, I'm ready.
High courts, they've got extensive powers, you know.
Okay, reflecting their importance, I guess.
Exactly, they're crucial. And to simplify, they've got several types of jurisdiction. First, we've got original jurisdiction.
Original jurisdiction.
Yeah, this means they can hear certain types of cases directly right from the start.
Oh, so they're not just a court of appeals.
Nope, they're the first point of contact for some pretty big issues.
Like what kind of issues?
Well, things like admiralty disputes, which are all about maritime law.
Okay, ships in the sea.
Exactly. Then there are election petitions.
Like challenging election results.
You got it. And violations of fundamental rights.
So protecting those core freedoms.
Absolutely. And then we've got revenue matters, all those things related to taxes and government income.
So they deal with some pretty weighty stuff, impacting people directly.
Oh, yeah. This is where the law meets everyday life.
And this is all just original jurisdiction? What other powers do they have?
Well, there's writ jurisdiction.
Writ jurisdiction.
This one's a biggie, a powerful tool for protecting individual rights.
Okay, tell me more.
High courts, they can issue writs, basically legal orders, to enforce fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution or any other legal right, really.
So they can step in to protect people's rights.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. They can issue these writs to anyone, even if they're outside their own state.
Wait, really? They have that much reach?
As long as the reason for the legal dispute, what we call the cause of action, arises within their jurisdiction, they can intervene.
Wow. So they can even overrule decisions made in other states.
Not overrule, more like step in when someone's rights are being violated, even across state lines.
So how does this compare to the Supreme Court's power to issue writs?
Good question. Both the Supreme Court and high courts can issue writs to protect those fundamental rights.
Okay.
But high courts, they actually have a broader scope.
Broader? In what way?
Well, they can issue writs for any purpose related to legal rights.
Okay.
Whereas the Supreme Court, their writ jurisdiction is specifically for fundamental rights issues.
So you could argue that high courts are more accessible for a wider range of problems.
Yeah, they're closer to the people dealing with those everyday legal battles.
Makes sense. Okay, what else? What other powers are we talking about?
Let's move on to appellate jurisdiction.